think that to me, there's two important sides of what Plantasia is. It's this chill, relaxing game where you get to grow and breed plants in a really vibey environment of orbital outer space in these like alien elements. There's this super vibey space station meets greenhouse feel. And then the other side of it is what I had talked about before, which is that like the reality of growing plants by yourself in an orbital space station is, and like for a reason in the narrative, is like, I have a purpose. I'm doing this like really organic and earthy and lovely thing, but oh man, am I alone. I think that that's just like, I'm a huge sci-fi book nerd. I like the crossover with sci-fi of philosophy and introspection through like the lens of an otherworldly situation. I think that that's what the game is to me, is like it, like I said, it's such a vibe piece. So like the process of growing plants and that being the core of the gameplay is just like a really fun, relaxing, chill thing. From Harvest Moon 64, like I've loved cozy games and things where you get to just kind of disassociate and explore this chill environment of relaxation. And then at the same time, I think that that narrative and that structure of like, what is the emotional journey or implication of the environment you're existing in, which is like the cold, dark vacuum of space meets happy little plants. So I think that if I am doing a better job of doing that as an elevator pitch, it's a chill, relaxing, cozy game to grow plants in space. And it's the cold, dark vacuum of isolation in space meets happy little plants. Yeah, it's just like the soundtrack. I just like tried to be really indulgent about it and make a lot more than we needed. I'm really stoked on it. Like I think that it sounds really great. Like I was describing in sort of the narrative or emotional journey that felt unnecessary but was really fun to play with. I'm hoping that it comes across in the game with everything that we've finished, sort of thing. But to me, it's like it didn't need to. It was like I made my own world of like emotional development and like narrative progression in the scope of the soundtrack by itself. And I think that it's going to translate pretty well in the game, but like I didn't need it to, you know, like it was like enough fruitful soil for me to like work with. I'm really stoked with how it came out. So I think that creatively it was just a really fulfilling soundtrack, and I think that it sounds rad. I really like layers, and I try to like balance excess with minimalism a little bit from just an inside baseball thing. Like I really like layers and processing and lush full things, but I like structures that are like minimal and accessible, keep things very musical while staying very progressive. Nothing stays too still. I think that it's important in like a game environment to be chill and blend into the background. But from a music side of things, I like stuff that's always evolving, that's always moving. And I think that's key to like Mort Garson too, is that they're these very sort of like musical, lyrical structures that have very firm roots in like classical music almost, and accessibility and harmonies and stuff. But it's like also prog rock from the 70s. So it really like moves and tells its own story by constantly evolving and changing. Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to do. To be honest, like I was more into the idea of doing games younger than I was like doing music professionally. So like I've always sort of had music and audio in my life. I started music from a very young age, and I was always involved in music pretty heavily, but it was never really like a career aspiration until I dropped out of high school and then decided that like I wanted to go back to the world of education or in some capacity, and that path for me was either art or music, and I chose music. And so I like auditioned in and did equivalencies, and I have like 3 degrees now, but like never graduated high school. I've had a interesting path, sort of like as far as getting more directly into music in a career path, and then worked at studios and done a whole bunch of different things. But my passion for gaming has been like kind of the biggest thing in my life. I've been like the biggest nerd in the nerdiest types of games forever. And even my connection from like music to games has been interesting. I took like piano lessons when I was a really young kid, and then I kind of fell off with piano. I didn't like the structure of music lessons by the time I was like 10. So I stopped taking piano lessons, and I did some like drum lessons, and I had some other things with music. But really what got me back into music was that I had like an old Casio keyboard, and I would like figure out the songs from Golden Sun for Game Boy Advance. And so then it became like Donkey Kong, David Weiss songs and stuff, but I would like figure them out on a keyboard, and I would like record myself like playing these songs and stuff. So I would like transcribe them. And that actually like got me into writing music. And then composition has been like my focus for all of my schooling in music. So on the one hand, I'm just a huge nerd. And on the other hand, I've had a big passion for games and game music my whole life. So one big thing is that while I've been involved in some game projects, like the scope of this has a certain reach that has been fun to play with, especially that like I'm heading everything for audio. So it's been a really interesting experience, sort of. One, I guess, like the team is run really well as far as structure and being able to like work collaboratively throughout all the teams. And me heading all of the sides of audio, it's been a really eye-opening experience for exactly what that takes for all the different areas. And whether it's working on the programming side with like Alexa and Alex before, or trying to build a narrative with the soundtrack with like talks with Val, it's been a really cool process to like think holistically of the entire project from top to bottom and drive all of that myself for once. I very quickly developed a connection to what I saw as the meat of the project for me. There was such a bigger playpen for me than just what the game is on paper, because I was super drawn to the idea of these dualities of the cold, dark vacuum of space and isolation, and like growing happy little plants, and like the artificial or synthetic manufactured space station and the organic, earthy, growing life in this space station. So like building a narrative with the soundtrack that told the swings between hopeful and lush and exuberant and like, I am so alone out here. That was like really fun to explore. And from the start, being able to drive that whole thing and kind of like get as indulgent as I want to be with it when I don't think it needed to be, you know, like for when you describe the game and stuff, it didn't need that much. And I just was like, yeah, but I don't care. I want to play in this idea. So I did really hard. I will say from the other side of things, it was a really cool thing to have this indie startup game company where we're all kind of like in control of our own destinies, and we get to like live out a greater scope and see what we can make out of it. Just felt like it was a time in my life where I could do that, and it was a great way to explore it. I guess like I have learned a lot on the programming and implementation side that like will be valuable for projects going forward. From just like a more technical side of things, I would say that I've just like learned a lot about the process of implementation. Some of the things that I've learned would help me streamline in future projects as far as knowing the direction. A lot of what I did in this game was like, I'm pretty sure all of this is possible. And everybody was like, yes, I'm pretty sure it is too. And then we figured out how it was possible. But like the time between those two things and like being certain is definitely been shortened for everything I do after. I guess one thing that I guess was interesting is just how I got involved with the team was always kind of fun, which was just that like I had seen stuff about Cave Bear launching and sort of this idea of a small indie startup thing where it was a larger project that we could all kind of like play in and have sort of an ownership of to hit a larger scope than other opportunities would have given us. So I had seen a lot of that stuff and thought, that's interesting, and it's a time in my life at which I could do that and could have fun with that. But it wasn't until they posted something saying like, our game, like Plantasia. And the name Plantasia means something to me, which is Mort Garson's Mother Earth's Plantasia, warm earth music for plants and the people who love them, which was an amazing synth composition album from the 70s by a great Canadian synth composer named Mort Garson. I've been like nerding out on that album for decades, and it's like a hugely touching and impactful piece of music for me. And like I have it on vinyl and I love it. I should have it right here to show you the vinyl because it's great. I love Mort Garson so much, and I literally reached out to Ayla and was like, hey, I saw what you're doing and I was already kind of interested in it. And then I saw you mention the name Plantasia, and I love Mort Garson. And I think that that's the direction you should go with this, is like this analog, earthy, synthy, progressive, just compositionally, like there's just really lush ideas. And I wanted to kind of like capture that with a modern edge or a combination of sort of bridging the gap between analog, electronic, and acoustic, earthy, folky elements and stuff. And then even like I liked blending sort of this chill lo-fi set of elements at the same time. Him being such an inspiration to me, and it being sort of this connection to the game, where I guess like Ayla just thought the name was cool, and then later on somebody was like, hey, there's like this album, have you ever heard it? And she was like, oh, it's great. By the time I had contacted her, they knew the connection. Basically, I just made my pitch as like, I want to pay tribute to Mort Garson as much as I possibly can because I love him. I also think that when talking about my connection between like music and my love of games, Mort Garson is a big piece of that, because part of the like lore of Mort Garson, first of all, just not to ramble too much, but one of the great things about that album is that it was an album that was released on vinyl and that you got given to you when you bought houseplants from like a housing supply center in like Northern California. So like that's how it was distributed. You would like buy houseplants and they would give you this vinyl to like play synth music for your plants to make them happy. And I just think that's amazing. But another side of that is that like his distribution for this music was so small at the time. And one of the areas where he kind of like took off or got notoriety was that he had a much larger distribution in Japan. There was like Japanese labels that slung his music out there. And it ended up basically like influencing a generation of video game composers, like young nerdy kids who liked synthesizers. That sort of crossover of like, if you're a video game kid in Japan and you're a music kid, you're probably into like weird analog synthesizers. And so there's straight up songs from like that album and from some of his others that were like almost lifted or incredibly inspirational for game songs that are still incredibly well known today. Like I would say that more people have heard Zelda's Lullaby than have heard the album Mother Earth's Plantasia, but like it's on Mother Earth's Plantasia, like a very slightly adjusted version of that song was just taken from others' Plantasia. And I'm not faulting that composer. I'm just saying that like it was this hugely inspirational thing, and I love that sort of crossover between the two worlds.